Why did Russia's most secure command post vanish in seconds? That was the question echoing across global defense circles as Ukrainian intelligence revealed how a single strike crippled an entire Russian command hub near Tokmak. The explosion wasn't just a lucky hit, it was the product of months of electronic warfare, algorithmic target mapping, and surgical timing. The key? Ukraine's Hortitsia intelligence network working with NATO-grade signal intelligence SIGINT arrays and real-time drone surveillance. In early 2025, with President Donald Trump reaffirming direct U.S. logistical coordination with NATO allies, Ukraine had access to advanced Western reconnaissance systems capable of intercepting encrypted Russian battlefield communications. Through combined electronic warfare and unmanned aerial surveillance, Ukrainian operators identified patterns: radio silence before tank massing, convoy movement patterns from T-90M units, and the intermittent bursts of encrypted chatter from Russian command vehicles. These signals, cross-referenced with satellite imaging from Western assets, painted a picture of the Russian deployment grid. Analysts at the Kyiv Military Intelligence Directorate confirmed that the Russian command had centralized at one hardened base near Tokmak, a hub coordinating artillery fire from the Zaporizhia sector. Ukraine's counterstrike planning was therefore not reactive, but predictive. Experts from Jane's Defense Weekly and Defense News highlighted this operation as one of the most precise EW-guided targeting missions since the Gulf War. Drones like Shark and PD-2 conducted layered mapping, while software-defined radios, updated with Western firmware in late 2024, intercepted Russian communications down to the regimental level. The strike's timing was calibrated based on a recurring pattern, a high-command coordination meeting scheduled every third night. That night, the command post was crowded with senior officers. The operational architecture of this ambush reflected the changing face of modern warfare, where artificial intelligence and ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, integration, turn a single signal spike into a lethal data point. This wasn't just about hitting targets, it was about collapsing an entire decision loop. Western defense analysts now view this as a textbook example of fifth-generation targeting, where Ukraine used not brute force, but information dominance. An idea born from US Air Force doctrine and perfected under battlefield pressure. How much further could data-driven warfare go? Could Russia adapt fast enough to counter this invisible front of the war? At precisely 2:14 a.m., a single Su-24M took off from Starokostiantynivka Air Base under near-total radio silence. The cruise mission, to deliver Storm Shadow cruise missiles deep into Russian-held territory. The challenge was monumental: fly low enough to evade radar, high enough to maintain guidance lock, and reach the launch point before Russian early warning arrays could detect them. Every second mattered. With President Donald Trump having expanded US-Ukraine defense coordination earlier that spring, NATO provided updated radar suppression data from AWACS patrols over the Black Sea. Using this information, Ukrainian pilots mapped a corridor just 80 meters above ground level, weaving through radar gaps created by terrain masking and electronic interference. The aircraft's terrain-following radar, recently modified with Western avionics, adjusted its altitude dynamically, hugging the ground with precision that older Soviet systems could never achieve. The Su-24's crew operated under what Ukrainian officers called silent convergence. Communication was replaced by coded blinks on the mission display, minimizing any signal that could be tracked by Russian ELINT. Below them, ECM pods blasted bursts of white noise toward S-300 and S-400 detection grids, overwhelming the Russian radar operators with phantom signatures of non-existent aircraft. At the heart of this mission was not bravado, but mathematics. The missile's flight profile was calculated to the millisecond, a choreography between gravity, air resistance, and enemy radar rotation cycles. Each Storm Shadow would need to travel nearly 200 kilometers inside contested airspace, relying on GPS-denied guidance. Western sources later confirmed that US contractors helped recalibrate Ukraine's terrain matching algorithms to compensate for Russia's GPS spoofing in southern Zaporizhia. The missile's warhead weighed nearly 1,300 kilograms, yet the real weapon was the algorithm guiding it. The Storm Shadow's terrain contour matching allowed it to glide under radar sweeps, briefly surfacing over ridgelines before diving back into the Earth's shadow. This new form of digital stealth blurred the line between manned and autonomous warfare. When the launch authorization came, both missiles vanished into the night sky. No engine roar audible to ground sensors. Just the faint shockwave trailing behind. Russian defense networks failed to register the intrusion until it was too late. Analysts from Defense News later described this as a quantum leap in low-altitude strike tactics, marking the first time Ukraine successfully launched deep strike ordnance inside a multi-layered Russian defense grid without detection. For the pilots, success depended not on evasion alone, but on precision. A fusion of NATO data, Ukrainian ingenuity, and American technology. But as the missiles cut through the night, one question lingered. Had Russia's billion-dollar radar shield already become obsolete? Moments before impact, a curious phenomenon unfolded on Russian radar screens. Dozens of small, fast-moving blips appeared simultaneously, erratic, shifting altitudes coming from multiple vectors. To any operator, it looked like a full-scale air raid, but it wasn't. These were peak-load decoy cruise missiles combined with UJ-26 and RAM-2X kamikaze drones, Ukraine's evolving swarm deception technology. Each decoy drone carried a minimal payload, but emitted radar and infrared signatures mimicking real aircraft. Analysts from Jane's Defense Weekly compared the tactic to the US Air Force's Wild Weasel missions, yet more advanced in digital deception. These drones, guided by pre-programmed algorithms and Starlink-supported telemetry, simulated flight patterns of incoming bombers, forcing Russian Pantsir S and Tor M2 units to reveal their positions. Within minutes, Russia's air defenses opened fire, not at real threats, but at specters. This tactical sleight of hand reflected how warfare had shifted from mass to micro-precision. While Russian operators scrambled to track the swarm, their radar screens grew cluttered, filled with false returns. Meanwhile, the real attack vectors, the Storm Shadows, slipped silently through radar corridors intentionally created by these distractions. According to defense news analysts, Ukraine's coordination of electronic deception with kinetic strike capability represented one of the most sophisticated SEAD operations of the war. It relied less on brute firepower and more on timing, coding, and psychological warfare. This is not about destroying the radar, it's about making it blind, noted Colonel Mark Peterson, a retired U.S. Air Force EW specialist. In battlefield terms, this tactic bought precious minutes. Russian air defense systems like S-300 and S-400 require synchronization between search and engagement radars. The decoy swarm's chaotic movement desynchronized them entirely. By the time operators realized the deception, missile lock had shifted toward harmless drones. The operation highlighted Ukraine's transformation from a reactive force to a proactive innovator. Backed by real-time NATO intelligence and Western AI-assisted targeting systems, the Ukrainians effectively hacked the Russian OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act, forcing hesitation at every step. But what made this event even more critical was timing. Simultaneously, in the Middle East, Israel was using similar AI-guided decoy tactics against Iranian air defense batteries. Analysts from The Guardian and DW later noted that this synchronization of methods between Ukraine and Israel showed a growing Western influence in modern asymmetric warfare, a form of strategic signaling toward both Moscow and Tehran. As the radar clutter intensified, the sky over Tokmak lit with chaotic tracer fire, hundreds of missiles chasing shadows, and then silence. The radars went blind for exactly 3 minutes. It was all Ukraine needed for the real strike to begin. If this kind of coordinated drone warfare can disable one of the world's most complex defense networks, what happens when AI swarm systems reach full autonomy? Would the next generation of war even need pilots at all? At 2:47 a.m., two Storm Shadow missiles entered the final descent phase, guided by preloaded satellite imagery and laser-aided cueing relayed from forward drones, their flight path adjusted by mere centimeters with every kilometer. The first missile struck the main ventilation shaft of the Russian command bunker, its broach tandem warhead piercing through reinforced concrete before detonating within the underground complex. The second followed seconds later, targeting the communications hub located beside the main vehicle depot. The effect was surgical and catastrophic. Satellite imagery from Western intelligence, later verified by Reuters and DW, showed the blast pattern consistent with an internal collapse, not a surface detonation. The precision proved that the missiles had penetrated multiple defense layers before triggering. Analysts called it one of the cleanest kinetic strikes of the war, using less explosive mass than a conventional bombing run, yet achieving exponentially higher structural damage. The technology behind this accuracy traced back to Anglo-French design merged with real-time NATO data link integration. Storm Shadow's guidance system, enhanced in early 2025 under US-approved firmware updates, used a hybrid of GPS-denied navigation and optical scene matching. When GPS jamming intensified, the missile relied on a digital image library, comparing terrain snapshots taken by orbiting satellites mere hours earlier. It effectively saw the target through the fog of electronic warfare. Western analysts noted that such integration blurred the boundary between kinetic and digital warfare. The missile was no longer just a munition, it was a self-steering reconnaissance drone with a warhead. Jane's Defense Weekly reported that after the impact, secondary explosions continued for 10 minutes, evidence of detonated fuel reserves and stored munitions within the bunker. Inside the Russian base, chaos reigned. Command terminals went dark, power grids failed, and senior officers were trapped underground. Intercepts collected by Ukraine's Hortitsia EW unit captured fragmented Russian radio chatter. Panic, confusion, orders to reroute communications through field relays that no longer existed. Within minutes, the entire local command structure had been severed. The precision strike didn't just destroy a physical base, it fractured the psychological core of Russian coordination in the southern front. Defense experts from Al Jazeera emphasized how this kind of invisible precision had redefined deep strike philosophy: low quantity, high lethality. The West had long theorized this concept. Ukraine had now proven it in combat. Observers noted a parallel with NATO doctrines in the Baltic Sea and the Taiwan Strait, where small, stealthy strike packages are being tested to counter larger, heavily fortified forces. In essence, the strike near Tokmak was not just a tactical victory, it was a demonstration of a new military paradigm: intelligent lethality. But as smoke rose over the Zaporizhia horizon, one question began circulating through Western think tanks and Russian military forums alike. If precision data and AI coordination can render deep bunkers useless, what defenses remain for the next phase of warfare? By dawn, the battlefield in southern Ukraine looked deceptively quiet. Yet beneath that silence, Russia's entire operational command network had splintered. The strike at Tokmak didn't just destroy buildings, it shattered the connective tissue of command and control C2. With the headquarters annihilated, field units suddenly operated blind. Orders stopped flowing, artillery fire turned erratic, supply convoys waiting for clearance from the now destroyed command post froze in position. According to NATO intelligence briefings leaked to Reuters, the Ukrainian strike had eliminated at least 4 key coordination officers, including the deputy commander overseeing artillery in the Zaporizhia sector. Without their data fusion nodes, Russian forces reverted to analog tactics, relaying messages through unsecured radio frequencies. Within hours, Ukrainian electronic warfare units intercepted those transmissions, exposing troop positions and ammunition routes. Experts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, described this as systemic paralysis, a term rarely used outside theoretical wargaming. Ukraine had effectively dismantled Russia's sensor-to-shooter chain, the process by which reconnaissance data becomes a firing command. Every additional minute of communication lag meant slower response times for Russian artillery and higher survivability for Ukrainian troops. Western analysts noted that the Russian military's traditional rigidity compounded the disaster. Their centralized command model, built around senior officers and fixed facilities, was precisely what Ukraine's evolving doctrine sought to exploit. With their C2 architecture disrupted, Russian formations lacked flexibility to reconstitute command in the field. Meanwhile, Ukraine's counter-artillery systems, notably American-supplied M270 MLRS and German PZH-2000 units, began precision targeting Russian batteries still firing without updated coordinates. Defense News confirmed that, within 48 hours, Russian fire output in the southern corridor dropped by 70%. The blowout from the Tokmak strike had transformed from a single tactical hit into a region-wide operational collapse. Strategically, this moment marked a turning point in NATO's perception of hybrid warfare. Analysts from The Guardian emphasized that Ukraine's fusion of Western intelligence, AI-supported targeting, and homegrown drone warfare was a proof of concept for future Allied operations. A distributed brain that could operate even under heavy electronic jamming. It redefined how wars of attrition could be turned into wars of attrition by data. The broader question, whispered through Brussels, Washington, and Berlin, was how Moscow would retaliate. Russian state media hinted at escalated missile deployments in Crimea and the Black Sea, while satellite data revealed the movement of S-500 units closer to Melitopol. Yet, despite these gestures, the core issue remained. Without effective digital synchronization, Russia's advanced weapons were like chess pieces without a board. For NATO observers, the implications extended far beyond Ukraine. In a potential Taiwan or Iran confrontation, the Tokmak model demonstrated how precision EW-guided strikes could neutralize superior firepower without full-scale confrontation. Western experts began referring to it as the 3-minute war, a battle won not by manpower, but by milliseconds of digital dominance. And as Europe watched this technological earthquake unfold, one question loomed. Could Russia rebuild faster than Ukraine could innovate? In the days following the Tokmak strike, Ukraine transitioned from defense to calculated maneuver warfare. Small, agile combat groups, often no larger than platoon strength, advanced across sectors once guarded by Russian artillery fire. The change was immediate and visible on satellite imagery. Instead of slow, deliberate assaults, Ukrainian troops executed rapid hit-and-fade raids supported by real-time drone feeds, turning every surviving Russian outpost into an isolated island. These formations operated under what Western strategists now call the Tokmak Doctrine. It fused precision strikes, AI-driven reconnaissance, and mobile exploitation, a hybrid approach born from the lessons of 2024 but refined through NATO coordination in 2025. President Donald Trump's administration had, earlier that year, authorized expanded real-time intelligence sharing between NATO satellites and Ukrainian command centers. This allowed Ukraine to replicate the US military's network-centric warfare model on a smaller, deadlier scale. With Russian defenses fragmented, Ukraine leveraged its new momentum. Reconnaissance drones like Leleko 100 and Bayraktar TB2 now acted as both eyes and forward controllers, coordinating with Western-supplied Excalibur artillery rounds and HIM ARS systems. Strikes that once took 20 minutes to authorize now took less than 3. According to a BBC Defense analysis, this unprecedented synchronization allowed Ukraine to reclaim more than 30 square kilometers of contested terrain in the Zaporizhia axis within 2 days, without a full-scale offensive. Western military experts saw this as more than a localized success. It was a testbed for NATO's own modernization. The US Air Force and Bundeswehr observers monitoring the operation noted how seamlessly Ukraine had combined decoy drones, EW suppression, and precision munitions into a single continuous cycle. They've turned the chaos of the battlefield into a digital orchestra, remarked Colonel James Latham, a retired Pentagon analyst speaking to DW. Yet beneath the triumph, a grim undertone persisted. Russia began adapting. Satellite intercepts detected increased deployment of anti-drone laser systems near Mariupol and Belgorod, suggesting Moscow was pivoting toward counter-swarm technologies. Still, analysts agreed. Russia's adaptation was reactive, always one step behind Ukraine's evolving algorithmic warfare. The greater lesson emerging from Tokmak was not about territorial gain, but about paradigm shift. The traditional model of massed armor and artillery dominance had given way to precision, mobility, and intelligence supremacy. NATO strategists now viewed Ukraine's campaign as a live experiment in next-generation warfare, a glimpse into how Western militaries might fight in future conflicts from the Baltic to the South China Sea. For Ukraine, victory was not measured in kilometers, but in seconds. The time it took to process, decide, and strike before the enemy could react. That efficiency had become the new deterrent. As night fell over Zaporizhzhia once more, the ruins of Tokmak glowed faintly beneath drone surveillance lights, a silent reminder that wars of the future would not be fought with armies, but with networks. So the question remains, as artificial intelligence, electronic deception, and precision warfare redefine the battlefield, will humanity still control the wars it begins? Or will the code itself choose when they end? The Tokmak strike redefined modern warfare through an unprecedented integration of intelligence, deception, and precision. Ukraine's use of AI-assisted EW systems, NATO data, and low-altitude missile tactics allowed it to annihilate a fortified Russian command post without detection. Storm Shadow cruise missiles, guided by optical scene matching and digital terrain algorithms, proved that information could be more destructive than firepower. Following the attack, Russia's entire command network collapsed, disrupting artillery coordination and exposing the weakness of centralized control. Ukraine capitalized on this chaos with mobile, decentralized units that exploited the enemy's paralysis through speed and information dominance. Western analysts now cite the operation as the benchmark for network-centric warfare, showcasing the fusion of drones, data, and deep strike technology. Strategically, the Tokmak Doctrine signaled a global shift. It showed NATO and the US that wars are no longer won through volume, but through precision and algorithmic superiority. From Ukraine to potential flashpoints like Taiwan or the Persian Gulf, the message is clear. The side that controls data will control the battlefield. The question facing the world's militaries now, are we witnessing the future of defense or the dawn of autonomous